So this, of course, is the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. Hostilities have broken out between Israel and Palestine, and the tensions that had been gathering steam over the course of the last several weeks and months have now crystallized into an early morning raid and an unprecedented barrage of rocket fire by the Hamas militant group into Israel. There are conflicting reports about the number of casualties, but according to one report, more than 100 Israelis, many of them said to be Israeli soldiers, have been killed. Many Israeli soldiers have been pulled out of their military tanks and have been taken captive. Israel has, of course, responded with aerial bombings, and more than 200 people, according to reports, 200 Palestinians have been killed in this air raid by Israel. So what has happened today? And what sort of an implication will this have in the days to come? Our next report gets you more details.
A regular Saturday morning in Israel, downed in deafening sounds of airstrikes and sirens. Hamas, Gaza's militant group, launched a coordinated attack of an unprecedented scale. Operation Al-Aqsa Storm, a never-seen-before series of missile attacks by the militant group Hamas, barreled into Israel, reaching deep into Israeli territory, some going as far as Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
בסביבות השעה 6 בבוקר בערך נפל פה טיל ליד הבית. כתוצאה מכך הכל נשרף, הבית נהרס, חלונות, קירות, שמענו ממש זעזוע, הילדה נבלה. לא יודע, חיים במציאות שהיא לא אמיתית.
Just as the missiles pounded Israel, Palestinian gunmen in large numbers tore through the fences at the Gaza-Israel border. They ransacked Israeli artillery and seized their tanks, parading them like battle trophies, in what's been called one of the most brutal conflicts between Israel's regime and Palestinians. 100 Israelis have been killed so far. Hundreds are wounded. The numbers are expected to rise further. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that the country is now in a state of war. The country has rallied its defense forces, and the Israeli government has called an emergency cabinet meeting. Top leaders have promised that Israel's enemy will pay the price, a type of which they have never known.
מהבוקר מדינת ישראל נמצאת במלחמה. היעד הראשון שלנו הוא קודם כל לתאר את השטח מכוחות האויב שחדרו פנימה ולהשיב את הביטחון והשקט ליישובים שהותקפו. היעד השני במקביל הוא לגבות מחיר עצום מהאויב גם ברצועת עזה. היעד השלישי הוא לבצר זירות אחרות כדי שאיש לא יטעה ויעשה את הטעות להצטרף למלחמה הזאת. אנחנו במלחמה צריך לשמור על קור רוח. אני קורא לכל אזרחי ישראל להתאחד כדי להשיג את היעד העליון שלנו, ניצחון במלחמה.
Shortly after the Hamas attack shocked Israel, it began its own counter-strike, Operation Iron Swords. The country retaliated with a brutal air raid across the Gaza Strip. Scores of fighter jets rained down on Hamas sites in Gaza. Over 17 Hamas military compounds were hit. Close to 200 Gazan Palestinians have been killed and over 1,500 injured. Palestinian president came out in support of the Hamas group, referring to what he called terror of Israeli settler troops. Mahmoud Abbas said the Palestinians have the right to defend themselves. As the violence skyrockets, Palestinians in the West Bank were seen marching in hundreds, celebrating the Hamas attack on Israel. For many, the warlike situation is a closure, a retribution for all that Palestinians have suffered at the hands of Israeli forces and settlers. The Hamas offensive and inroads made into Israel mark several firsts, even as they put up a host of question marks on Israel's boasted capabilities against the Palestinians. and the world is in the grip of a second war situation it certainly doesn't need. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And also, what is the situation in the Gaza Strip at this moment? Because remember, the last few hours, Israel has been carrying out repeated air raids into the Gaza Strip. This is what the night sky looks like at this moment. These are live visuals that are being beamed out from the area that's presently in conflict. We spoke to a student from Gaza to get a sense of what people in Palestine at this moment are going through. Listen in.
So today morning at 6 a.m. In Palestinian Standard Time, like everyone in this area who was following the news, he's surprised about what happened when we saw the footage and the news coming out that Palestinian resistance crossed the border between Gaza and Israel, and they attack or raid the Israeli settlement. So most of people, they were so happy and surprised how that possible, how it could be. But for me, I got shocked. I thought I'm watching series or I'm watching as a film, a drama. So I couldn't believe in what happened. I thought these kind of fake news or these kind of footage, it's really fake. After some time, when the news coming out and followed from the other Palestinian reporter and citizen journalist, so I realized that how the situation is terrible and what will happen, especially when the Palestinian resistance, they killed Israeli people, settler, and who arrested Israeli soldier, and this footage, it was filmed from Gaza as well when they arrested some Israeli soldiers. That was a really terrible situation about what will happen now, how Israel will respond, because as you know, civilian who is always the victim of war, not soldier. Soldier, ultimately, they are trained people. They know how to deal with such kinds of situation. But civilian people who's always the victim of the war between any kind of part of the war, of the conflict. So now after 4 p.m. Israel start intensively bombing Gaza, like blindly bombing Gaza. There is, I confirm you, there is no one single safe place in Gaza. Even the telecommunication infrastructure, it got damaged. There is no power, there is no electricity now in Gaza, and I can't contact with my family. I'm facing really hardly. I'm able to contact them to be assured how is they are safe or no, as well as the internet service, it's come down and slow. It's incredibly so hardly the information coming out from Gaza bombing. But when they told me and when I able to contact them, they said there is no single place without didn't hit by Israel. All the area they got bombed by Israeli airstrike, and really incredibly, you can't imagine how is the voice of the bombing and how is the voice of Israelis rocket, as well as people are confused in Gaza now after that what happened since morning. They were so happy, and now everyone he or she scared, children screaming, old people, they can't do anything. What they will do in front of these kind of bombing, or in front of these kind of airstrike. So what I could be able to say now, the situation is really escalated and the violence is going to increase more and more.
All right, so that was a student from the Gaza Strip giving us a first-hand account of what life has now turned like in the Gaza Strip, where he said that there is no power, there is no electricity, and there's very little in terms of communication that people in Gaza have with the constant bombing that Israel has now resorted to. And also to give us more updates in terms of what is happening at this moment in the state of Israel, our correspondent Jody Cohen is joining us on the phone line. Jody, bring us up to speed with what the situation is like on the ground.
So in the latest, we've heard that thousands of rockets have been fired by Hamas into Israel, reportedly continually since 6:30 this morning. At least 100 Israelis have been killed, 950 Israelis have been hospitalized, and Hamas have said that they've taken numerous hostages, and that's now been confirmed by the Israel Defense Forces, and including reportedly citizens have been taken hostage from Nepal. Now, the IDF say that they have struck Hamas targets in Gaza in response. Gazan officials are saying that their retaliatory strikes have killed at least 200 and that they're planning to extend their operation to the West Bank and to Jerusalem.
Absolutely, indeed. That was Jody Cohn there getting us the latest. And also to give us more insights in terms of what's in fact happened since the hostilities have broken out between Israel and Hamas earlier this morning. We're being joined by Colonel David Desroches. He's a professor for East-South Asia Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University, and he is joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Colonel Desroches, the tactics that have been used by Hamas since this morning have taken everyone by surprise. There are videos of drone attacks that are now doing the rounds. This looks like a strategy that is used very extensively by Russia in the battlefield in Ukraine, where drones are being used to drop ammunition on soldiers underneath. This is a capability that Hamas had never before exhibited. Are you surprised by this?
No. I mean, we've seen this. Actually, the Ukrainians have been more effective at this. The Russian drones tend to be so-called one-way suicide drones that crash into targets. We saw this used by Daesh during the battle for Raqqa in 2016 and in the battle for Mosul. We've seen Mexican drug cartels use this against the Mexican police forces and military. It's an inevitable escalation of warfare, and I don't think anybody should be surprised by it. We've also seen the use of anti-tank guided missiles. The same model is used in the 73 war. What it shows us is that if you have a tank, you still have to seek cover. You still have to find a protected position, or you can be attacked.
And also considering the fact, a lot of people would be aware, Gaza Strip is a pretty small territory of land. It is under blockade by the state of Israel since 2006, 2007 onwards. Everything that enters and exits from Gaza happens under the watchful eyes of the Israelis. With that being the context, are you surprised that Hamas was able to smuggle in rockets to the tune of 7,500 rockets and other ammunition which has been used in carrying out this raid into Israel?
Okay. Well, Gaza does have a border with Egypt, and in the past there has been significant smuggling along that border. But what we've seen is that from about 2014 onward, Iran realized that it was very, very hard to smuggle rocket components to Lebanese Hezbollah, to Hamas. And what they did was they started encouraging people, teaching people how to make their own out of things. So we've seen videos when we had the last Israel-Hamas war. There were videos by Hamas showing them making rockets out of water pipes. These are not sophisticated, highly guided missiles, and they don't have the discretion in their targeting that you would expect from a modern army. So, they probably are hitting indiscriminate targets. Right. But no, it's not surprising at all.
And this is something that I'm pretty sure will be talked about in the days to come. Israel has what it describes as the Iron Dome, something that it has used very successfully in the past in taking down many of these crude rockets that are fired from the Gaza Strip. But looking at what has happened today, more of these crude rockets by Hamas have managed to get through the Israeli airspace that have struck targets indiscriminately than any time that we've witnessed in many decades in the past. Do you think the Palestinians have done something differently this time, that they've been able to pierce through the Israeli Iron Dome?
No, I don't think so. I think they just took it to its logical conclusion, which is an Iron Dome interceptor costs several millions of dollars. And so there are, limited number of targets they can hit. And so, there's a limited number of interceptors, so you just have to fire more. 7,000 is a lot. And I'm pretty sure Israel does not have 7,000 interceptors. So what the Iron Dome software has to do is, first off, acquire all of these rockets, and they probably acquired most of them, prioritize them, and for interceptors. And that means that you're deprioritizing some. So some of the rockets probably landed in the desert, but I think the Israelis had to make some hard decisions and say, look, our Ministry of Defense headquarters is a higher priority for defense than, say, a school, settlement.
Right. And also the videos that are now doing the rounds of Israeli soldiers and Israeli tanks which have been destroyed, Israeli soldiers being pulled out of the tanks by the Hamas fighters. How do you think is Israel going to respond to this? Because according to information that is coming in, and there are conflicting reports, we still do not know how many hostages the Hamas fighters have in fact taken into their custody. How does Israel go from here?
Yeah, so there's two categories being held by Hamas. There's hostages, which are civilians, and I think that's going to inflame the Israelis more. There is video of women being marched into Gaza, presumably as captives. And then there are the prisoners, the Israeli soldiers. Israel historically has exerted a lot of effort to get them back. There's also videos of dead soldiers and at least one dead woman, I can't tell if she's a civilian or a soldier, whose corpses are being mistreated. That will inflame Israeli public opinion. Historically, Israel has been rather discriminate in its responding. I'd rather, be a civilian going by my own business in an area targeted by the Israelis than, say, an area targeted by the Syrian army. But there will definitely be calls from extremists for vengeance. And unfortunately, that will cloud analysis and cloud Israel's own best interest.
All right. Now, in the past, the criticism against Israeli action has been that Israel resorts to collective punishment of the Gaza Strip every time there are these actors who commit acts of crime. Do you think Israel will again resort to some kind of a collective punishment of the Gaza Strip, or will it be more amenable to international opinion on how best to in fact deal with this crisis?
That's a good question. So I think collective punishment, when Israeli applies it, is usually in the forms of economic. They do things like they seal the border tighter. They don't permit various supplies to come in. In some instances, it's things like cement, which have been used, which are necessary for building houses and schools and hospitals, but can also build bunkers. I think that will tighten up. I think that they will, stop the flow of some commodities into there, and that will make an already bad economic condition worse. What there has not been to this date evidence of the Israeli government, the Israeli military applying collective punishment in the forms of indiscriminate bombing. There have been a lot of civilian casualties, but at least in the last conflict, what we've seen is this is because Hamas usually positions military and political targets in close proximity to civilian targets. The Israelis are actually pretty good at minimizing civilian damage, but this position, as you noted, it's so small, so densely packed, so populated that I think there are going to be a lot of Palestinian civilians killed, but I don't think they're being targeted.
At least about 200 Palestinians have already been killed. Yeah. That is the information that is coming in. Thank you very much indeed, Colonel David DeRoche, for joining us and getting us all those insights there. This, of course, is the latest in terms of what has happened ever since hostilities have broken out this morning, where Hamas, it appears, has caught Israel by complete surprise. It has fired more than 7,500 rockets into Israel, captured many of the soldiers and quite a few civilians, and it has taken them hostages. And it's difficult to see as to how things, of course, will unfold from here. Israel is responding, and we're given to understand that these operations will, of course, continue. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.